Wembley Stadium was called the Heart of England, a place where 200,000 people saw history shatter the boundaries of control, where the world watched England's greatest triumph, and where 1 billion people joined one thunderous moment for Live Aid. Yet, almost no one can tell you how or why this cultural time capsule was quietly erased, without documentation, relics, or a national reckoning. How does a nation's memory disappear in plain sight? The truth begins long before the wrecking ball. In the spring of 1923, a new structure rose from the muddy fields of Wembley Park. Conceived as the centrepiece for the British Empire exhibition, Wembley Stadium was never meant to last. The original blueprints called for a temporary showpiece, something bold enough to impress foreign dignitaries, but destined for demolition once the exhibition closed. Yet from the start, the stadium defied its own script. Wembley became more than a temporary building. It became an idea. Architects Sir John Simpson and Maxwell Ayrton, working alongside engineer Sir Owen Williams, designed a bowl of concrete and steel unlike anything else in Britain. Their vision centered on two immense towers, neither a flourish nor an afterthought, but the stadium's literal backbone. The twin towers, with their domed tops and exposed concrete, were engineered to anchor the entire facade. Simpson described them as gates to Britain's future, while early press releases promised a monument that would outshine any rival in the empire. As spectators arrived, the towers set the tone. They were built to intimidate and to inspire, to give the impression of permanence even as the empire's grasp on the world was slipping away. Gates and future are words that came up again and again in early accounts. As the exhibition drew to a close, the stadium's fate hung in the balance. Financial losses threatened to bring in wrecking crews, and for a brief moment the grand design seemed doomed to become rubble. Then Arthur Elvin, an entrepreneur with an eye for opportunity, stepped in. Elvin purchased the site at auction, rescuing it from demolition. His gamble paid off and Wembley survived, quickly becoming the home of English football and national ceremony. Arthur Elvin appears in every origin story. The Twin Towers soon became shorthand for authority and spectacle. They loomed over royal parades, military displays and sporting finals. Their silhouette was burned into the national imagination. For many, the towers were not decoration. They were the reason Wembley stood at all. Authority is the word people use when they try to explain that feeling. Every visitor who passed beneath them entered a space built to intimidate and to inspire. What began as a temporary gesture of imperial bravado had, by accident and ambition, become a permanent symbol. Permanent and symbol capture what the towers meant to a nation. Crowds poured into Wembley for the 1923 FA Cup final, far more than anyone expected. Officially, the stadium could hold 125,000, but estimates put the number that day at over 200,000. Barriers gave way, and people spilled onto the pitch, a human tide that threatened to overwhelm the event before it began. In the middle of the chaos, a mounted policeman, P.C. George Scory, guided his white horse Billy through the masses. The image of Billy parting the crowd became legend. Newspapers called it the day order triumphed over chaos, and Wembley became the stage where anything felt possible. Through the 1930s and the 1950s, the stadium played host to royal pageants and military displays. Monarchs waved from open cars, regiments marched in perfect formation, and the towers stood silent and unshakable behind them. Wembley's facade became a backdrop for national reassurance, especially after the war. Newsreels sent images of the towers across the country, reinforcing the sense that this was not just a building, but a national altar where ceremony and spectacle merged. In 1966, the world's attention turned to Wembley for the World Cup final. England's victory was broadcast live to millions, the raw sound of the crowd echoing through living rooms from London to Sydney. Every aerial shot lingered on the towers. For many, the moment Geoff Hurst scored his third goal is inseparable from the sight of those domes rising above the pitch. Wembley was no longer just a British landmark. It was now woven into global memory, a monument to triumph and possibility. By 1985, the stadium had become a pulsing heart of modern culture. Live Aid drew a global television audience of over 1.5 billion. The biggest names in music shared the stage, and the stadium's roar carried around the world. For a generation, Wembley became the place where music, technology, and hope collided. These moments, sporting, royal, musical, gave Wembley a mythic weight. Every crowd left a trace, turning the stadium into a living archive of emotion and memory, a place where the nation gathered to witness itself. By the early 1990s, a new language crept into official statements about Wembley. The Football Association, government ministers, and leading sports columnists began describing the stadium as outdated, unfit, and too expensive to maintain. Headlines in The Independent declared Wembley no longer fit for the next century. The Times dismissed it as obsolete, warning that the cost to patch up its decaying structure would far outweigh the price of a new replacement. The Minister for Sport, Tony Banks, went further and referred to the Twin Towers as concrete blocks, a phrase that landed with a thud among those who saw them as national icons. Yet even as these claims multiplied, Wembley continued to host elite events. England's national team played qualifiers under the floodlights. Packed concerts filled the terraces. Safety reports, while noting the need for upgrades, stopped short of declaring the stadium unfixable. The Taylor Report, released after the Hillsborough disaster, required all-seater stadiums and improved crowd management, but it did not demand Wembley's destruction. By the late 1990s, Wembley had already converted to all-seater status and met the basic safety standards set out by the report. Despite this, press releases and Football Association board statements hammered the same points. Wembley was too old, too costly, too cramped for the modern era. The rhetoric was coordinated, with public relations agencies recasting heritage as an obstacle to progress. Proposals from architects and fan groups ranging from reinforcement of the existing structure to partial rebuilds that would preserve the Twin Towers were brushed aside. No detailed public analysis was offered. The message was clear and repeated in government memos and Football Association newsletters. Major renovation is not feasible, and complete redevelopment is the only option. The public, surrounded by this language, began to accept demolition as inevitable. The narrative of decay broadcast from official channels drowned out the voices calling for preservation. Behind closed doors, decisions were being shaped not by engineering reports or fan sentiment, but by a vision of what Britain's future should look like, driven by focus groups. The expectation of loss became so familiar that few stopped to question how the story had changed or who had changed it. Brochures from the late 1990s promised a future where the Twin Towers would stand guard over a new Wembley. Early planning documents circulated by the Football Association and developers included glossy images of the towers flanking a modern bowl, their domes still anchoring the skyline. Heritage campaigners seized on these visuals, pressing officials to confirm that the national icon would not be erased. For a time, the public message was clear: the towers would be saved. But as redevelopment talks moved behind closed doors, the promise began to unravel. Engineering consultants hired by the Football Association produced new memos arguing that the tower's concrete shells could not bear the weight of a modern stadium. Later reports claimed the towers would collapse if moved or integrated into the new design. When preservationists requested structural assessments, the technical language shifted again. Now the towers were described as too expensive to stabilize, or simply not valuable enough to warrant the effort. Each explanation contradicted the last, but the outcome never changed. English Heritage and Brent Council registered formal objections, citing the tower's Grade 2 listing and their role in the national story. Their arguments appeared in council minutes and public statements, but were quietly overruled. The Football Association press releases stopped mentioning the towers altogether. By the time demolition was approved, the plan to retain them had vanished from public documents, replaced by a single line stating complete clearance. Heritage advocates, architects, and local residents demanded to see the engineering data behind the reversal. Freedom of Information requests returned redacted reports or notices that records were not held. No full technical brief was made public. The only evidence of the tower's supposed incompatibility came from shifting statements and vanished brochures. For those who remembered the early promises, the contradiction was glaring. The towers were promised, then erased without a single transparent explanation. Transparency was demanded and never delivered. when the demolition of Wembley finally began, almost no one was watching. Unlike the endless reels of the 1923 White Horse Final or the saturation coverage of the 1966 World Cup, the stadium's final days slipped by with barely a trace. Broadcasters kept their cameras elsewhere. Requests for official footage produced only fragments, snippets from distant news crews, a handful of blurry fan videos, and a few press photos snapped from behind security fences. There is no multiple angle record, no time-lapse recording, no sanctioned documentary. Archive curators and historians searching for a comprehensive demolition log found only dead ends. Freedom of Information requests to the Football Association and Brent Council returned with heavy redactions, or with the simple reply that no records were held. Even the BBC and ITV, who filmed Wembley's greatest moments, offered only brief segments, often cut short or missing entirely. The absence is not just an oversight, it stands out in an age when even minor buildings are documented from every angle. Wembley, a landmark recognised around the world, is reduced to a few scattered images and partial reports. The silence in the archives is its own kind of evidence. It suggests not just a loss, but a deliberate erasure, an institutional decision to let the stadium vanish without a trace. What was once the stage for national memory is now a black hole in the historical record. The fate of Wembley's remains is as murky as the reasons for its demolition. In most stadium closures, seats, bricks and turnstiles are catalogued and sold, each piece a tangible link to memory. Wembley's artefacts, by contrast, slipped quietly into obscurity. The Football Association never announced a public sale. Museums received nothing of note. Instead, rubble from the Twin Towers and terraces was loaded onto trucks and carted west, vanishing into the man-made hills at Northala Fields. There, the concrete was buried beneath grass, with no plaque or marker to hint at what lies beneath. Some pieces surfaced far from London. The original wooden gates, once swung open for the White Horse Final, reappeared in Chile, their journey unrecorded. Collectors and auction houses report a flood of supposed Wembley relics, signs, fragments of seating, even chunks of masonry, but few items come with proof of origin. Without official certification, the market is awash with fakes, and genuine artifacts are almost impossible to verify. No single authority ever documented what was saved, what was destroyed, or who took possession. For a site so deeply woven into national memory, the physical erasure feels deliberate. The stadium that once belonged to everyone left behind no relics to mourn, only rumours and debris scattered across continents. Official records list Multiplex as the main contractor for Wembley's demolition, but the project's paper trail reads more like a riddle than a schedule. Companies' house filings reveal a churn of subcontractors. Some replaced mid-project, and others dissolved within months of completion. Site logs show stretches of inactivity, punctuated by bursts of overnight work when heavy machinery moved under floodlights and security tightened around the perimeter. Local residents recall weeks when the site was silent, followed by sudden activity that lasted only through the small hours. Public access was frequently restricted, even when no demolition was visible from the gates. Requests for daily progress reports encounter gaps, missing entries, unsigned forms, and vague explanations about health and safety. Multiplex's own financial disclosures from 2003 hint at disputes and cost overruns, while several smaller firms listed as demolition partners quietly disappeared from the register soon after the last load of rubble left the site. No single company holds the entire story. Instead, the demolition unfolds through a patchwork of dissolved entities and incomplete logs. For a project of this scale, the lack of a continuous, transparent record is striking. The process feels less like routine construction and more like an operation designed to keep its own history out of reach. The new Wembley arrived not as a monument but as a product. Its defining feature, the soaring white arch, was chosen for visibility in television broadcasts and for sponsor presentations, not for any connection to the site's past. Marketing presentations boasted that the arch could be seen from over 13 miles away, a beacon for aerial shots and for branding. Critics saw only a billboard in the sky. The stadium design, delivered by a global architecture firm, prioritized symmetry and efficiency over memory. Fan surveys and press reviews began to echo the same words: sterile, corporate, generic. Visitors compared the concourses to airport terminals, stripped of the quirks and shadows that had defined the old terraces. The new Wembley was engineered for the spectator economy. Its soul was replaced by a logo-friendly silhouette. Where the towers once anchored history, the arch now floated above a stadium that felt designed to be anywhere and to mean nothing in particular. Three main motives surface when trying to explain why Wembley's history was erased so completely. Some point to collective memory control. By wiping away the old stadium, institutions could rewrite English sporting heritage for a new global audience less tied to empire and nostalgia. For these critics, the act was about erasing a specific past to make way for a new narrative. The word control keeps coming up. Others suggest liability concealment. The argument is that demolition removed lingering evidence of past safety failures or regulatory oversights, shielding the Football Association and government from future scrutiny. Where records are missing, suspicion grows. The word liability keeps returning. A third motive centers on geopolitical branding. The new stadium, with its eye-catching arch and sponsor-friendly design, positioned Britain as modern, marketable, and Olympic-ready. Those qualities replaced the old towers and their imperial symbolism. The word branding captures that shift. Each theory draws from the same facts: shifting justifications, missing records, and a finality that left no room for compromise. Older fans speak of Wembley not as a place, but as something lived in the body. The smell of damp concrete and spilled beer, the taste of cold air on the terraces, the way the roar rolled through your chest until you felt it in your bones. One recalls, you could feel the noise, not just hear it. Another says, it was holy ground. I remember the smell more than the view. For many, the first time walking beneath the towers was a rite of passage, a moment when the world seemed larger and more possible. The demolition left a wound. When the goals went in, we shook, an elder supporter remembers, voice breaking. The stadium's absence is not just an empty space on a map. It is a missing piece of self, a silence that cannot be filled. Today, the site where Wembley once stood is modern, efficient, and anonymous. In a country that preserves centuries-old pubs and railway arches, the near-total erasure of its most iconic stadium remains an anomaly. When memory leaves so few footprints, erasure becomes easy, and questioning becomes urgent. History is only as safe as the traces we choose to keep. What traces do we protect next? Share your thoughts below.